The smoke from the cooking fires always made my eyes water in the morning, but I didn't mind. It meant mother was preparing the morning meal, and the whole band would gather soon. My name is Koru, and I've seen 12 dry seasons pass since my birth. Our people call ourselves the tree walkers, though the elders say we're changing, becoming something new. They speak of how our ancestors lived only in the trees, but now we spend more time on the ground, especially when we travel between the forest patches that dot our territory. I remember the day everything changed for me, the day I truly understood what it meant to be one of the tree walkers. It started like any other morning in the forest clearing where our band had made camp. The air was thick with moisture from the night's rain, and drops still fell from the broad leaves above us whenever the wind stirred the branches. My younger sister, Asha, was already awake, poking at a beetle with a stick. She was always the first one up, always curious about everything. At 8 dry seasons old, she asked more questions than anyone else in our band. "Koru, why does this beetle have such a hard shell?" she asked, not looking up from her examination. "To protect itself from being eaten," I told her, stretching my arms above my head. My sleeping nest of woven branches and soft leaves had been comfortable, but my muscles were stiff from the cool night. "But we don't eat beetles," she said, frowning. "No, but birds do. And some of the other animals." I climbed down from my nest, which was built in the lower branches of a sturdy tree, about 3 times my height from the ground. We still slept in the trees for safety, though not as high as our ancestors once did. The camp was beginning to stir. I could see Uncle Baru emerging from his nest, his graying fur catching the early morning light that filtered through the canopy. He was one of our best tool makers, and I'd been learning from him how to shape stones into useful implements. "Morning, young ones," he called down to us, his voice still rough with sleep. "Today we search for good stones near the river. You come with me, Koru." I nodded eagerly. Learning to make tools was important for a young male of our band. The better tools you could make, the more valuable you were to the group. And I wanted to be valuable. I wanted to be like Father, who was one of our leaders, respected by everyone. Father emerged from the nest he shared with Mother, moving with the quiet confidence that made him such a good hunter. His arms were long and powerful, perfect for swinging through trees when needed, but his legs were strong too, adapted for walking upright across the savanna that bordered our forest home. "The scouts report a leopard kill near the eastern rocks," Father announced to the waking camp. "We should investigate. There might be marrow bones left." This news sent a ripple of excitement through our band. Marrow was a prized food, rich and filling. If we could get to the kill site before the hyenas, we might feast today. Mother looked up from the fire where she was roasting tubers we'd gathered yesterday. "Take the older children," she suggested. "They need to learn." And that's how I found myself part of the expedition that would change everything. There were 6 of us, Father leading, Uncle Baru, my older cousin Daki who had just become an adult, 2 other adult males named Goro and Tam, and me. We also brought 2 of the older females, Aunt Kala and her daughter Nira, because they were excellent at spotting danger. We moved through the forest with practiced ease, sometimes walking upright along the ground, sometimes using our long arms to swing through the lower branches. I was proud of how quietly I could move now. Last dry season, Father had scolded me for stepping on too many twigs. Now I placed each foot carefully, watching where the others stepped, learning their patterns. The forest was alive with sounds. Birds called from the canopy, their songs mixing with the buzz of insects and the distant calls of monkeys. I loved these sounds. They told stories if you knew how to listen. A sudden silence might mean a predator was near. Alarm calls from birds could guide you away from danger or toward food. As we moved closer to the forest edge, the trees became sparser, and more sunlight reached the ground. The air grew warmer, and I could smell the different scent of the grassland ahead. It always made me a little nervous, leaving the safety of the trees. On the ground, we were more vulnerable. But it was also exciting. The grassland held different foods, different opportunities. Stay close, Father warned as we emerged from the tree line. The savanna stretched before us, golden grass waving in the morning breeze. In the distance, I could see the rocky outcrop where the scouts had reported the leopard kill. We moved differently here, fully upright, our eyes scanning constantly for danger. My heart beat faster. I'd been on the savanna before, but never this far from the forest. Uncle Baru must have sensed my nervousness because he moved closer to me. "Remember what I taught you about reading the grass?" he asked quietly. I nodded. "Look for paths, animals make trails, fresh bends in the grass means something passed recently." "Good. What else?" "Watch the birds. If they fly up suddenly, something disturbed them." "Very good." "And?" I thought hard. "Listen to the wind. It carries scents and sounds from far away." He patted my shoulder with approval. His hand was rough from years of working with stones, but gentle. "You learn well. Stay alert." As we approached the rocks, Father held up his hand for us to stop. He sniffed the air, then made a series of quiet grunts that meant wait and danger. We all froze, every sense alert. Then I smelled it too. The musky scent of hyenas, mixed with the metallic smell of blood. My stomach tightened. Hyenas were dangerous, especially in groups. They wouldn't hesitate to attack us if they thought they could win. Father motioned for us to spread out slightly, still staying close enough to help each other if needed. We moved forward more carefully now, using the scattered acacia trees for cover. As we got closer to the rocks, I could hear the sounds of feeding, crunching bones and aggressive growls. We climbed into a large acacia tree that gave us a good view of the kill site. What I saw made my breath catch. There were 5 hyenas feeding on what remained of an antelope. The leopard was nowhere to be seen. It had probably made the kill during the night and eaten its fill before abandoning the carcass at dawn. "Too many," Koru whispered. "We should leave." But Father was studying the scene carefully. "Look," he said quietly, pointing. "The big female is injured. See how she favors her left front leg? And the others are young, inexperienced." I looked more carefully and saw he was right. The largest hyena was definitely limping, and the others seemed smaller than the ones I'd seen before. Still, 5 hyenas were 5 hyenas. We can drive them off, Father decided. But we must work together. Koru, you stay in the tree with Nira. Watch for other dangers. I wanted to protest, I wanted to be part of the action, but I knew better than to argue with Father during a dangerous situation. Nira, who was only a few seasons older than me, looked equally disappointed but nodded obediently. The adults climbed down and began gathering stones and sturdy branches. This was one of the things that made us different from other animals. We could plan, we could use tools, we could work together in complex ways. Uncle Baru selected good throwing stones, testing their weight and balance. The others found long branches that could be used as clubs or spears. When they were ready, Father organized them into a formation. "Make noise," he instructed. "Look big. Stay together." They emerged from behind the trees as a group, shouting and waving their weapons. The hyenas looked up from their meal, startled. The injured female tried to stand her ground, but when Uncle Baru's thrown stone struck her on the shoulder, she yelped and backed away. The younger hyenas were already retreating, intimidated by the display. Father and the others advanced steadily, maintaining their noisy assault. Another well-aimed stone from Tam convinced the injured female that the meal wasn't worth fighting for. With angry yips and backward glances, the hyenas retreated into the tall grass. "Quickly now," Father called. "They won't go far." The adults rushed to the carcass while Nira and I kept watch from our tree. I scanned the grassland constantly, looking for any sign of the hyenas returning or other predators approaching. This was important work, I reminded myself, even if it wasn't as exciting as driving off the hyenas. The adults worked with practiced efficiency. They used sharp stones to cut away the remaining meat, but the real prize was the bones. Uncle Baru produced his favorite hammerstone and began cracking open the long bones to expose the marrow inside. "Koru," Nira whispered, pointing to the east. "Look there." I followed her gaze and saw movement in the grass. At first, I thought the hyenas were returning, but then I realized it was something else. A group of figures was approaching, walking upright like us. "Others," I called down to the adults, using the word we used for bands like ours but not of our family group. Father looked up sharply, then stood to get a better view. The approaching group was still distant, but I could make out maybe 8 or 9 individuals. They moved like us, that distinctive upright walk that marked our kind. "Gather what we have," Father ordered quietly. "We leave." But Uncle Baru was looking at the strangers with interest. "Wait," he said. "I recognize their walk. See how the leader moves? That's Yoko's band. We traded with them 2 seasons ago." Father relaxed slightly but remained watchful. Relations between bands could be friendly or hostile, depending on many factors. Resources, territory, past interactions, all played a role in how groups treated each other. The strangers had spotted us now and stopped their approach. For a long moment, both groups watched each other across the grassland. Then the leader of the other band, Yoko, if Uncle Baru was right, raised his hand in a gesture of greeting. Father returned the gesture, and the 2 groups slowly approached each other. Nira and I climbed down from our tree but stayed close to the adults. I'd seen other bands before, but interactions were always tense at first. As they got closer, I could see that Uncle Baru was right. I recognized some of the faces from a gathering 2 dry seasons ago. There was Yoko, tall and lean with a scar across his forehead, and his mate, a female with unusually light-colored fur. They had several young ones with them, including a male about my age who I remembered was named Pila. "Yoko," Father greeted formally. "Your band travels far from your usual territory." "The dry season has been hard," Yoko replied. His voice was similar to ours but with a slightly different accent. Each band developed its own way of speaking over time. "We search for new foraging grounds. The fruit trees in our area produced poorly this year." Father nodded sympathetically. "Poor fruit harvests affected everyone. We have had better luck. Our territory still provides." I could see Yoko's people eyeing the meat and bones we'd gathered from the kill. They looked thin, hungrier than us. One of their young ones, a small female, stared at the marrow bones with obvious longing. There was a moment of awkward silence. Sharing food with another band was a big decision. It meant less for us, but it also built alliances that could be valuable later. I watched father's face as he weighed the options. It was mother who would have made the decision if she were here. Females often decided matters of sharing and cooperation. But in her absence, father looked to Aunt Kala, the senior female present. Aunt Kala studied Yoko's band, particularly the young ones. Then she nodded slightly to father. "We have enough," she said simply. Father turned back to Yoko. "Share our fortune," he offered, gesturing to the carcass. "There is meat left, and bones we haven't cracked." The relief on Yoko's face was obvious. "You are generous. We will remember this." And so the two bands worked together for a while, harvesting what remained of the leopard's kill. I found myself working alongside Pila, the boy my age from the other band. He was quiet at first, but when I showed him a particularly good cutting stone Uncle Baru had made, his eyes lit up with interest. "Your toolmaker is skilled," he said, examining the sharp edge. "Ours died last season. We struggle to make good tools now." "Uncle Baru is teaching me," I told him, trying not to sound too proud. "Maybe he could show your band some techniques." Pila looked hopeful. "That would be valuable." As we worked, I learned more about their situation. Their territory was to the east of ours, in an area that was becoming drier each year. The rivers ran low earlier, the fruit trees produced less, and the game animals were moving away. They were considering relocating but didn't know where to go without encroaching on another band's territory. "Why don't you move toward the mountains?" I asked. "There's always water there." Pila shook his head. "The mountain bands are not friendly to outsiders. They guard their territory fiercely. And the forests there are different, more dangerous predators, less familiar foods." I understood. Each band adapted to its specific territory over generations. Moving meant learning new dangers, new food sources, new patterns of weather and wildlife. It was not done lightly. When we'd taken all we could from the carcass, our two bands sat together in the shade of the acacia trees to eat. The marrow was rich and satisfying, and I saw color return to the faces of Yoko's people as they ate. The adults talked while we ate, sharing news and information. "The big river to the south is lower than ever," Yoko reported. "The crocodiles are concentrated in the remaining pools. Very dangerous." "We've noticed changes too," father said. "More grass fires. The herds move differently than they used to." "The world changes," Uncle Baru observed philosophically. "We must change with it or perish." There was wisdom in his words, though I didn't fully understand them at the time. I was more interested in the immediate situation, in the way our two bands were interacting. Despite the initial wariness, people were beginning to relax. Some of the females were comparing gathering techniques. Two of the males were discussing hunting strategies. And I noticed something else. Nero was watching one of Yoko's young adult males with obvious interest. He was well built and moved with confidence, and when he smiled at her, she looked away quickly but smiled back. I rolled my eyes. Nero was always noticing males from other bands at gatherings. As the sun climbed higher and the day grew hotter, it was time to return to the forest. The savanna was dangerous in the heat of midday when predators sought shade and we were more visible in the shimmering air. "Travel with us," father offered to Yoko. "Our camp has room, and we can share more information about the changing territories." Yoko accepted gratefully, and our enlarged group made its way back toward the forest. I walked with Pila, and we talked about many things: the games we played, the skills we were learning, the stories our elders told. Despite coming from different bands, we had much in common. Do you ever wonder what lies beyond? Pila asked as we walked. Beyond the territories we know. Sometimes, I admitted. The elders say there are places where the trees grow so thick you can travel for days without touching the ground. And places where there are no trees at all, just grass as far as you can see. I want to see those places someday, Pila said. Maybe when I'm grown, I'll be a scout who explores new territories. That's dangerous, I pointed out. Unknown places mean unknown dangers. Yes, but also unknown opportunities. New foods, new materials for tools, maybe even new bands to trade with. His enthusiasm was infectious. I found myself imagining what it would be like to be the first to see a new place, to discover resources no one in the band knew about. It was an exciting thought, but also frightening. When we reached the forest edge, everyone relaxed visibly. The shade was welcome after the hot savanna, and the familiar sounds and smells of the forest made us feel safer. Our camp wasn't far now. As we approached, I heard Ash's excited voice before I saw her. She was perched in a tree at the camp's edge, obviously stationed as a lookout. They're back. And they brought others. The camp burst into activity. Those who had stayed behind emerged from various tasks to see who had come. Mother appeared from behind the main fire, her hands stained purple from processing berries. When she saw we had guests, she immediately began organizing. Kala, tell me everything, she said to Aunt Kala, and the two females moved aside for a quick conference. Meanwhile, the rest of Yoko's band entered our camp cautiously, looking around with curious eyes. Our camp was well established. We'd been here for almost a full season, and it showed. We had good sleeping nests in the trees, well-maintained fire pits, areas for tool making, and food preparation, and even a small shelter made of branches and leaves for storing dried foods and tools. Yoko's people looked impressed, and I felt proud of our home. Mother quickly took charge of hospitality. Asha, bring water gourds. Koru, help gather more firewood. We'll need to prepare a proper meal for our guests. I set down the meat I'd been carrying and went to collect wood. Pila came with me, eager to help. As we gathered fallen branches, he marveled at our forest. Your trees are different from ours, he observed. Taller, with more fruit varieties. Uncle Baru says it's because we're closer to the river, I explained. More water means bigger trees, more fruits. He knows about these things. We made several trips, building up a good supply of firewood. By the time we finished, the camp had transformed into a bustling social gathering. Yoko's band had settled in various spots, and conversations were happening everywhere. The younger children were already playing together, their initial shyness forgotten. I watched as Uncle Baru sat with some of Yoko's adults, demonstrating his tool-making techniques. He had his favorite stones laid out and was showing them how to judge which rocks would fracture properly. His audience watched intently, especially one older male who seemed to be trying to memorize every movement. See how the stone has these natural lines. Uncle Baru was explaining. Strike here, at this angle, and it will break cleanly. Strike there, and it shatters uselessly. Mother and the other females were sharing food preparation techniques. They had spread out various plants and were discussing their properties. I heard Mother explaining about a root that was poisonous raw but became nutritious when cooked in hot ashes for a full day. We lost 2 members before we learned this, one of Yoko's females said sadly. They ate it raw during a hungry time. Knowledge must be shared, Mother replied firmly. What one band learns through tragedy can save another band from the same fate. Father and Yoko sat apart with some of the senior members of both bands, their discussion more serious. I couldn't hear everything, but I caught fragments about territorial boundaries, seasonal movements, and resource-sharing agreements. These were the important talks that shaped relationships between bands. As the day wore on, I found myself part of a mixed group of young ones from both bands. Besides Pila and me, there was my sister Asha, 2 of Yoko's younger children, and 3 from our band. We decided to show the visitors our best climbing trees. "This one," I said, patting the smooth bark of a massive tree near the camp's edge, "goes higher than any other. From the top, you can see all the way to the mountains." "Show us," one of Yoko's young ones challenged. I looked at the adults to make sure it was allowed, then began climbing. The familiar handholds and branches welcomed me, and I ascended quickly. Behind me, I heard Pila and the others following. Asha, despite being younger, kept pace with us easily. She'd always been a natural climber. As we climbed higher, the view opened up magnificently. Through gaps in the canopy, we could see the savanna we'd crossed that morning, golden in the afternoon light. In the other direction, the forest stretched endlessly, a sea of green broken only by the silver thread of the river. "Look there," Pila pointed to the east. "That smoke. That's near our usual territory." We all looked. Sure enough, a column of smoke rose in the distance. It was too controlled to be a wildfire, someone was maintaining a large fire. "Other bands?" I suggested. "Maybe," Pila said, but he looked worried. "Or maybe strangers." Yoko mentioned seeing signs of unknown people moving through our area. This was concerning news. Unknown people could mean many things, not all of them good. They might be bands forced to move by changing conditions, or they might be aggressive groups looking to claim new territory. We climbed down more soberly, and Pila reported what we'd seen to the adults. This sparked a new round of discussions. It turned out that several bands had reported signs of strangers, unfamiliar footprints, tools made in different styles, temporary camps that didn't match known patterns. "The world grows crowded," one of the elders said. "When I was young, we could travel for days without encountering another band. Now they are everywhere." "Perhaps it's time to consider new ways," Uncle Baru suggested. "Instead of each band holding territory separately, we could share larger areas, move together seasonally." Some of the adults looked skeptical at this radical idea, but others seemed thoughtful. I could see Father considering it carefully. He was always one to think before speaking, to weigh all possibilities. As evening approached, the combined bands prepared for the night. There wasn't enough room in our established sleeping nests for everyone, so some of Yoko's people would need to build temporary ones. We young ones were tasked with gathering fresh leaves and flexible branches for bedding. Working together, we quickly assembled several new nests in suitable trees. I showed Pila how we wove branches together in a particular pattern that Mother had taught me, creating a stable platform that would hold weight safely. "Your band has many good techniques," Pila observed. "We could learn much from extended contact." "And we from you," I replied diplomatically, though privately I thought we probably had more to teach than learn. Still, Father always said every band knew something unique, some skill or knowledge developed through their particular experiences. As darkness fell, the combined bands gathered around the central fire for the evening meal. The females had prepared a feast from our stored foods and what we'd brought from the savannah. There were roasted tubers, fresh fruits, nuts ground into paste, and strips of the meat we'd salvaged, smoke dried to preserve them. But before we ate, there was a ritual to observe. When bands came together, it was customary to share stories, to reinforce the bonds between groups through common history and culture. As the senior elder present, our grandfather Auric was given the honor of beginning. Grandfather Auric was ancient by our standards, having seen at least 50 dry seasons. His fur was completely gray, and he moved slowly, but his mind was sharp and his memory vast. He settled himself comfortably by the fire, and we all grew quiet. I will tell of the time before, he began, his voice carrying the rhythm of countless retellings. When our people lived only in the trees and the ground was forbidden to us. I'd heard versions of this story before, but Grandfather Auric told it best. He spoke of our ancestors who never touched the earth, who swung through the canopy like shadows, who feared the ground as the realm of predators and death. He told of the first brave ones who descended, driven by curiosity or necessity, and discovered new foods, new possibilities. But the ground changed us, he continued. Our bodies adapted. Our legs grew stronger for walking, our spines straightened for seeing across distances. We became something new, not fully of the trees, not fully of the ground, but masters of both. When he finished, one of Yoko's elders asked permission to share a story. This was granted, and she told a tale I hadn't heard before, about a great drought that had driven bands together at the last remaining water source, and how they'd learned to cooperate instead of fight. The stories continued as we ate, each one teaching something, a survival technique hidden in an adventure tale, a moral lesson wrapped in humor, historical knowledge preserved in mythic form. I listened carefully, knowing that someday I would be expected to tell these stories to the next generation. But the most interesting part came when Uncle Baru stood to speak. Instead of a traditional story, he talked about the future. We stand at a crossing point, he said, his voice serious. The old ways served us well, but the world changes. We see it in the weather, in the movements of animals, in the increasing presence of other bands. Perhaps it's time for new stories, new ways of living. He went on to describe his vision, bands working together more closely, sharing territories and resources, combining knowledge and skills. It was a radical proposition, and I could see it made some people uncomfortable. We'd always been independent bands, coming together only for occasional gatherings or trade. And what of disputes? One of Yoko's males asked. When resources are scarce, who decides who gets what? We create new ways of deciding, Uncle Baru replied. Councils with members from multiple bands. Rules that all agree to follow. It's been done before, in the old stories. The great gathering at the sacred rocks, where 5 bands became one for a full season to survive a catastrophe. The discussion that followed was lively and sometimes heated. Some saw wisdom in Uncle Baru's ideas, while others feared losing their band's independence and identity. I listened fascinated, beginning to understand that we were living in a time of change, that the decisions made by our elders would shape the world I would inherit. As the fire burned lower and the youngest children began to fall asleep, the formal gathering broke up. But small groups continued talking quietly. I saw Father deep in conversation with Yoko and Uncle Baru, their faces serious in the firelight. Mother was with a group of females, and from their gestures, I could tell they were discussing practical matters, probably how such cooperation would actually work day to day. Pila and I sat together on a low branch, watching the adults. Do you think it will happen? He asked. This joining of bands that your uncle speaks of. I don't know, I admitted. Change is hard. People fear it. But sometimes necessary, Pila said. Like when we had to leave our old territory 3 seasons ago because the water dried up. We didn't want to, but staying would have meant death. We were quiet for a moment, thinking about that. Then Pila asked, if our bands did join, we'd be like brothers, wouldn't we? The thought made me smile. I'd like that. You could learn tool making from Uncle Baru, and I could learn, what are you good at? Pila grinned. Fishing. I know ways to catch fish with woven traps that I could teach you. Deal, I said, and we touched hands in the way that sealed agreements. As the camp settled for the night, I climbed to my sleeping nest. But sleep didn't come easily. My mind was too full of new ideas, new possibilities. I thought about the strangers Pila had mentioned, about the changing world Grandfather Auric described, about Uncle Baru's vision of united bands. From my nest, I could hear the night sounds of the forest, the distant call of a night bird, the rustle of small creatures in the undergrowth, the soft breathing of my bandmates sleeping around me. But now there were also the sounds of Yoko's people, adding their presence to our familiar symphony. It felt strange but not unpleasant. I must have dozed off eventually because I woke to the sound of urgent voices. It was still dark, but something was happening. I sat up in my nest, instantly alert, and saw adults moving below with purpose. Climbing down quickly, I found Father organizing a group of males. His face was tense. Scouts report a large fire to the east, he explained when he saw me. Not a campfire, bigger. The forest burns. My heart clenched. Forest fires were one of our greatest fears. In the dry season, they could spread with terrifying speed, destroying everything in their path. And to the east was where Pila had pointed out smoke earlier. Our territory, Yoko said, his voice tight with worry. We need to know if it threatens our camps. We go together, Father decided. Koru, wake the others your age. We may need to evacuate quickly. I ran to wake Pila, Asha, and the other young ones. As I shook Pila awake and explained, his face went pale. My grandmother, he said. She stayed at our main camp with the ones too old to travel. The next hour was controlled chaos. Adults prepared for possible evacuation while a scouting party went to assess the fire. We young ones were tasked with gathering essential items, tools, preserved foods, water gourds. Everything else could be replaced, but these were crucial for survival. As dawn broke, the scouts returned with their report. The fire was real and large, but moving south, away from both our territories. However, it was driving animals before it, and that meant both danger and opportunity. A herd of antelope approaches, the lead scout reported. Fleeing the fire. They'll pass near here within the day. But predators follow them, we saw lion tracks. This news changed everything. A panicked herd could provide hunting opportunities, but the predators following them were a serious threat. Decisions had to be made quickly. What followed was my first real lesson in how bands could work together in crisis. Father and Yoko quickly organized a coordinated response. Some would prepare a hunting ambush for the antelope, others would stand guard against predators, and a third group would continue preparing for evacuation in case the fire changed direction. I was assigned to the hunting group, my first time being included in such a significant hunt. Pila was with me, along with several adults from both bands. We moved to a narrow valley where the scouts predicted the herd would pass. Remember, Uncle Baru instructed us quietly as we waited, in chaos lies opportunity. The antelope will be tired, frightened, focused on the fire behind them. They won't expect danger from the sides. We spent the morning preparing. The adults showed us how to build a brush fence that would funnel the animals toward our ambush point. We gathered throwing stones and sharpened wooden spears. Every movement was purposeful, efficient. "Feel the weight," Uncle Baru said, handing me a well-balanced throwing stone. "Know it before you need it. In the moment of action, there's no time to think." As the sun climbed higher, we began to hear them, a rumbling that grew steadily louder. The ground itself began to vibrate with the approach of many hooves. My mouth went dry with nervous excitement. "Steady," Father murmured from his position nearby. "Remember your training." Then they appeared, a flowing river of brown bodies, eyes wide with fear, running from the smoke that we could now smell on the wind. There were so many, more than I'd ever seen in one place. The adults had positioned us perfectly, the herd was funneling right where we wanted them. "Wait," Father commanded, his hand raised. "Wait." A young antelope, separated from its mother, veered toward our hiding spot. It was limping, already injured, falling behind the main herd. Now. The coordinated attack was swift and efficient. Stones flew, spears thrust, and the injured antelope went down quickly. But we didn't stop there. Two more animals, confused by the attack, collided and stumbled. The adults moved in for quick kills. "Watch behind," someone shouted, and I turned to see what I'd been dreading: lions, 3 of them, drawn by the commotion and the scent of blood. This was the critical moment. We had meat, but could we keep it? The adults quickly formed a defensive line, weapons ready. But these lions had been following the herd for who knows how long. They were hungry, desperate. "Make noise," Father commanded. "Stand together." We shouted, waved our arms, threw stones. For a tense moment, the lead lioness evaluated us, calculating odds. We were many, we were armed, we stood united. With a frustrated growl, she turned away, leading her companions after easier prey from the continuing herd. We'd done it. 3 antelope, enough meat to feed both bands for days. But there was no time for celebration. We needed to process the kills quickly and get the meat back to camp before other predators arrived. Working together with practiced efficiency that belied our 2 bands' recent meeting, we butchered the antelopes. I was amazed at how smoothly everyone cooperated, as if we'd been one band all along. Perhaps Uncle Baru's vision wasn't so impossible after all. As we carried the meat back to camp, Pila walking beside me with a heavy load, he said, "This morning I didn't know if I'd ever see my grandmother again. Now we have food for days." The world changes quickly. "That's why we must change with it," I replied, echoing Uncle Baru's words from the night before. Back at camp, the successful hunt was greeted with joy and relief. The fire danger had passed, moving away to the south, and we had fresh meat. But more importantly, the crisis had bonded our 2 bands in a way that peaceful interaction might not have achieved so quickly. As the females prepared the meat for cooking and preserving, the males gathered to discuss what we'd learned. The fire, while dangerous, had brought opportunity. But it also highlighted the increasing challenges we faced. "These fires come more often," Yoko observed. "And larger. The dry seasons grow longer, the wet seasons less predictable. And we've seen that working together makes us stronger," Father added, looking meaningfully at the successful hunt's results. Over the following days, as Yoko's band remained with us, the idea of closer cooperation grew from Uncle Baru's vision into practical planning. The adults spent long hours discussing how it might work, shared territories with designated camping areas for each band, regular gatherings to exchange information and resources, coordinated responses to threats like fires or predator invasions. We young ones had our own discussions. Pila taught me his fishing techniques at the river, showing me how to weave flexible branches into funnel-shaped traps.